Hey everyone, welcome to Reddistry. If you love wild Reddit stories like crazy cheating tales, spooky scary stories to fall asleep to, or just need something to relax with, you're in the right place. We've got a new Reddit stories compilation for you every week, so make sure to like, comment, and hit that subscribe button. Also, don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Let's get into it. The motion sensor lights outside my childhood bedroom window kept turning on at night. I don't have a lot of memories from my childhood. It was one of those upbringings that wasn't particularly great, but wasn't entirely awful either. I always had a roof over my head and food to eat, but my parents could be ignorant, angry, and neglectful at times. My mother passed when I was in middle school, and while I don't remember much about the circumstances of her death, growing up with a single father caused a lot of friction when I was a teenager. There were simply a lot of little traumas, built up in such a way that they bricked off a lot of memories from my younger years. Now that I am older and on my own, I've begun to seek counseling to help me overcome these things. And as I have worked through my childhood in therapy, new memories have been emerging from the recesses of my mind. I've always loved to write, and at the urging of my therapist, I've decided to recount some of these memories in order to help myself understand them, and to perhaps draw forth further recollections to paint a clearer picture of the events that occurred. When I was young, my family moved from a small suburb to a large house in the middle of nowhere. I have no memory of the first house I lived in, but our new house became a hub of strange occurrences that only seem to happen to folks that live far outside of town in homes nestled in the woods. We lived at the base of a large hill covered in densely packed trees. These woods frightened and fascinated my childhood self, and while I have begun to recall some vague memories of strange happenings during my jaunts through the forest, those memories are not as clear as the ones I mean to share in this story. After about a year or two of living in our new home, my father became obsessive over our house's security for reasons I don't know or can't recall. He installed a massive picket fence around our property and bricked off the forested hill as best he could with large cinder blocks. Back in those days, security cameras weren't as easy to set up or come by, so he opted to install motion sensor lights around the entirety of our home. He would double and triple check the locks each night, and was very insistent to me that I never go outside at night. Not that I even wanted to. I was terrified of the dark and all the things that may lurk there. I always slept with my bathroom light on. The day he put those lights up is the day that started the events that led me to write this. Events that to this day fill me with a deep sense of dread, even though the memories are still foggy and unclear. I had two windows in my childhood bedroom. One faced the forested hill and the other faced more towards the front door. Being a little scared of the dark, I made sure my blinds were pulled close every night. There were those sort of weird segmented plastic blinds that never quite could keep out all the light, even when they were shut as tightly as possible. My father had installed motion sensor lights at every door, with several facing the hill in particular. The very first night he put the lights up, as I lay nestled in my bed listening to the songs of crickets and frogs while I tried to sleep. The light facing the hill flickered to life. That simple moment terrified my mind so much as a child that I'm amazed the memory lay forgotten for so many years. While the blind of my windows were as shut as I could get them, I could still see segmented lines of light streaming through and arraying themselves in neat rows on my bedroom floor. I was paralyzed in my bed, too scared to call for my parents, fearing that I would attract whatever had caused those lights to come to life. As I lay there, I recall seeing a shadow move through the lines of light. After a moment, the lights installed by our front door also roared to life, streaming through the second window of my bedroom. It felt like an eternity that I laid there in the half-dark, watching the lines of light on my bedroom floor in case the shadow came back. After a long while, the lights shut off automatically, and I was left with only the light from my bathroom streaming in from my cracked, open bedroom door. I did not sleep well that night. The following morning, I told my father what I had seen. He had a peculiar look on his face and took a long moment before he simply responded with, "It was probably just a deer. There's tons of them in those damn woods." There were a lot of deer in that area. In the spring, they would journey to our front yard to eat from our lilac bushes and lawn, much to my mother's chagrin. At the time, I was satisfied with this answer, and so when the lights turned on again and again and again, and when I heard the shuffling of footsteps and the crunching of leaves outside my window at night, I was never quite as frightened as I had been that first night. It went on like this for some time. Eventually, I accepted the routine and thought no more of the phenomenon until about a year later. My mother decided that she wanted to take advantage of our new country life and decided to buy 4 guinea hens. Why she decided on these God-forsaken birds and not something more simple, like chickens, is beyond me. They were horrible little birds that looked somewhere between a vulture and a turkey. My father built a hutch for them outside my bedroom, a large boxed-in space with tall walls and a metal mesh roof. They added a new, unpleasant suite of noises to the choir that sounded every night. The woods are never quiet. There were all manner of sounds, from crickets chirping to coyotes yelping in the distance. Those goddamn guinea hens would make unpleasant screaming, clucking noises right outside my window until late into the night. One night as I lay in bed, I struggled to sleep. Something felt wrong, and for once it wasn't the screaming of the guinea hens that was keeping me up. The outside lights were on, of course, but by this time I had grown so accustomed to that phenomenon that I no longer kept my bathroom light on at night. It took me a while to realize what was wrong. It was quiet. This realization chilled my bones. The woods were never silent. Any hope of falling asleep left me. I felt my heart pounding hard and loud in my chest. That's when I heard a sound. Not a loud sound, but it seemed to echo in the silence of the night. It's a sound that I find difficult to describe, but the closest approximation I can think of is the sound a plastic water bottle makes when you squeeze it. A slick, wet crunch. This sound repeated 3 times and the night fell quiet once more. The lights flickered off and died. When I finally fell asleep, I was woken abruptly by the sound of my mother screaming. I frantically scrambled out of bed to run to her, but my dad caught me in the hallway and told me not to go outside. About an hour passed before my parents called me out of my room. I had been huddled on my bed, reading the same page of a book over and over again. "The guinea hens went to heaven," said my mother in a trembling voice. She looked past me as she said it, her eyes wide, like saucers. My parents said some other small tokens of comfort, but I don't really remember what they said, nor do I think it was all that important. I was too afraid to tell my parents what I had heard in the dark, even though I knew now what had caused the sounds. The light scared me a bit more after that. I even tried sleeping in the living room once to avoid my bedroom windows, but in doing so, I learned that those lights were not the only ones turning on at night. Every motion sensor light turned on. Every night. It would start with the lights nearest to my bedroom, then over the course of a few minutes the other lights would turn on one by one until the entire area around our house was lit. A circle of light standing against the void of the night. After a couple minutes the lights would shut off, leaving our house once again thick with darkness. As time passed, the fear faded once again. I either dismissed the incident with the guinea hens as a fluke, or they faded into a dreamlike memory, as often happens with early childhood recollections. The fear slowly turned into curiosity as I got older. I started to go on walks in the woods only during the day, but my fear of them had subsided to the point where I would spend hours exploring that hill. Up until that point, the thought of actually looking out the window to discover what was causing the lights to turn on had never even crossed my mind. I had been far too afraid to even consider the notion. However, as the phenomenon continued, my curiosity grew. One night I finally resolved to do it. I always kept my blinds shut, but that night when I saw the lights had come on, I carefully swung out of bed and crept towards the window. As I got closer, I recall that the air started to feel cold and smothering, like I was pushing into a blanket of snow, despite the fact that it was midsummer in Southern California. I approached cautiously and wrapped my hand around the cord to lift up my blinds. In that moment, old fear overwhelmed me all at once, and I dropped the cord in a surge of panic, backing away from the window. The cord swung back and knocked against my wall, sounding incredibly loud as I realized with horror that the night was silent once again. It hit the wall and bounced back 3 times. Tap, tap, tap. I backed away towards my bed, barely daring to breathe when I saw a shadow cross the light streaming from my window. Then I heard clearly something knock my window. Knock, knock, knock. The sound reverberated through me. 3 knocks for 3 taps. I ran back to my bed and pulled my blankets around me, watching the shadow on my floor and barely daring to blink. The shadow did not move, and no other lights turned on. I watched it until the motion sensor lights turned off automatically, and I could no longer tell if it was still there. I never really told anyone about these incidents. At the time, I thought nobody would believe me, And as I got older, the memories were crammed into a dusty trunk in a corner of my mind, where they lay forgotten for many years until many of them rushed back with a freshness, as if they had only just occurred. Now that I have unlocked these memories, they still fill me with a deep sense of dread. For the moment, I can recall only one more incident. The knocking did not stop. From that night onward, it would always pause and knock on my window, and always 3 times. Needless to say, I was absolutely terrified. I dreaded going to bed. I hated being in my room, and I stopped all my ventures into the woods. However, amidst the sea of fear, I felt a compulsion to know what it was. I wanted to see what was causing my fear and dread at night. After a couple of weeks with very little sleep, I finally couldn't stand it anymore. I had to know. When the tapping returned that night, I got out of bed and walked towards the window, pretending to be more confident than I felt. I once again got that sensation of walking through something thick. The air had a weight and density to it. I reached the window. I reached my hand out and pulled down some of the blinds, just enough to peek through. What I saw is something that I truly cannot explain. However, despite all logic to the contrary, the memory of what I saw is so vivid that I have a hard time disbelieving it. Standing outside my window, clad in white, eyes wide and blank, was my mother. As I watched frozen in fear, she bent over backwards with her eyes still locked on mine. Her bones twisted and snapped, the sockets in her shoulders popping as she bent backwards, never moving her head. Like some sort of wild animal, she crawled backwards into the forest until the darkness covered her once more.